All right, team. We are back in the Fireside PM podcast, and today I'm going to do a little bit of reflection on common mistakes uh, executives make when interviewing product management leader candidates. Most common scenario is like you're a VP at a decent sized company, maybe CPO at a mid-stage startup, and you're hiring a director. So it's a very important role. It's a manager role. You're looking for a right-hand person. You know you can't do it all yourself. You have some decent PMs, ICs, but they need help. They haven't been around the block that much yet. So now is your opportunity to make that game-changing, bar-raising hire. And maybe you tried it and you brought in this director that you thought was going to be great, and they're not working out. What could you have done differently? Could it have been something in the interviewing process that caused you to extend an offer to someone who maybe it didn't make sense in hindsight to extend them that offer? Or were there people that might have been amazing for you that, decided to withdraw from the process or didn't accept the offer? What can you do now going forward? So if that sounds familiar, this will be a great video for you. Or if you are an experienced PM leader and you want to kind of just think from the other side of the table, this could be interesting for you as well. All right. So very common mistake with a lot of people, it's usually earlier in your career, but depending on your kind of journey, I've seen it in people fairly far along in their career. And this is that they kind of look at the interview as a sizing up exercise to see who is smarter or how close to me are you. And this is not productive in the long run, because at the end of the day, your job as an interviewer is to really understand this candidate and really see the best version of that candidate. And so if you're so focused on kind of intellectually flexing, then, well, I don't know, like you're not spending time understanding this candidate. And then secondly, even if you do decide this candidate's really great for you, it's not clear that that candidate's going to want to work for you. So, one of the things that I did earlier in my career was like, oh, let's see how we can test this person's like ability to solve a Rubik's Cube business problem, in a record time. And, kind of halfway through my interviewing experience, mid-career, I decided, you know what? Like, I'm not sure I'm really getting the signal that I need for me to succeed, which is I'm trying to build a great, high-performing, long-term team that can grow and retain. And if all I do is kind of do this equivalent of like intellectual bench pressing, there's absolutely a place for cognitive ability, and you'll want to test that. At the same time, how you do it is interesting. Like think about this, like you hire this person at work, they're going to solve the problem the way they think is best. They'll come to you with their thoughts and conclusions. You're not going to, hopefully, you're not going to like slam them because they didn't do it exactly the way you wanted them to do it, right? I mean, you're trying to build a team that's, has a intellectual diversity to it. So a better approach is really trying to give this candidate as many opportunities to kind of um, thrive in that 45-minute interview with you, or however long it is. And if they do really well, then you just slowly increase the challenge, or you kind of throw some curveballs, whatever it is. But you're not trying to stump them on day one, right? Or minute one. What you're really trying to do is you're like test driving a car. You're not going to floor it the moment you turn the ignition key or press the on button. You're going to want to drive it around the neighborhood and then take it on the highway. And then, if you want, you can go into the fast lane, because you're really trying to find out the foundational capabilities of this candidate. And now maybe your culture is you drop people into situations and you want them to be like, roaring their engines from the first second, and the CEO just expects that, and they just put people through the ringer every meeting. Okay, well then you got to simulate the way your company is. Most companies are not quite like that. They're not all Montessori school either, but there's probably a middle ground. And so another way to think about interviewing someone is, let's just make believe we're solving a work problem, and this weren't an interview, and this were a work meeting. How would we figure this out together? Because at the end of the day, like, that's what you really want, right? Like, when have you been in a work situation where one person has the answer in their head and it's up to the other person to like figure out what that answer is? Like, that just, I mean, again, like, maybe there are certain environments like that, but most companies are not like that. Thank God. Okay, next slide. Avoid surface level answers. So this one is almost the opposite of the first one, where you ask a question, they give you an answer, it sounds good enough, you ask your next question. And this is kind of like you may want to confirm more than once that you've gotten what you need. And so the problem here is that if you ask a question like, oh, tell me about a time when, you had to make a difficult product decision, or you had to build alignment in a cross-functional organization. Most candidates nowadays are very prepared for those questions. They've had their sessions with ChatGPT. They might have had a practice interview with me. So they're hopefully like gonna have good answers to those classic questions. But what you really want to do is you want to start getting to like the bone and the core kind of insights from that answer. So if they say like, oh, well, we had to do this major tech migration, and we had to negotiate with other teams on how to add new features versus migrate the old ones over, and there were different points of view. Okay, that's great. But what you could do is then you could say like, oh, can you give me a specific example of what one of the teams wanted to do? And then they'll be like, oh, well, this team wanted to build this new feature that was very important for their OKRs. And we just couldn't find a way to, support that while also bringing over these kind of table stakes features. And then you could be like, okay, what were some of the options you had contemplated? How did you decide that the feature they wanted was not possible? And what were the alternatives that you contemplated, and why did you not choose those alternatives? So what you're trying to do here is you're trying to get past the cheat sheet. You're trying to really get to the people. And if the people are giving you an authentic answer that's based on real experience, you're going to get there. And at some point, you're going to be like, all right, I'm pretty sure this person was really in this situation and they've thought about it in a sensible way, and, they'll be able to navigate these things. So you could ask, like, okay, why was it challenging? What would you do differently? What worked? What didn't work? What's another example where you tried a different approach? Um, if you ask enough questions, if someone has it, it's going to be clear. And if someone's like more, kind of interview prep and not really kind of doesn't have the experience and capabilities you're looking for deep down inside, like you'll be able to figure that out in the second or third layer of questioning. So don't take the very concise, easy answers and move on. You're not going through a checklist. You're really trying to test drive this car, so you're not just walking around looking for dents and things. You're going to open the door, you're going to close the door, you're going to turn on the radio, you're going to try and brake, use the brakes on the car. You're going to, accelerate, decelerate. You're going to try the cruise control. Like, be thorough. Okay, next is product sense. At the end of the day, a lot of the most impactful PMs are the ones that help your team launch new products or new features in existing products that really make that usage chart go up and to the right. And they kind of inflect that line. And so, when you're asking about the favorite product or how they would improve your product or some other product, what you'll commonly get is some frameworks that many people use, and they're great and they make a lot of sense. But I think the most interesting ones that you're going to want to look out for when you're interviewing someone is an answer that definitely introduces new perspective for you. And now some people may say, well, that's not fair. Like, why should they have to come up with something that the interviewer didn't already know in their head? The interviewer has asked this question before, or they've thought it through before. Well, the reason is, like, they're trying to hire people that bring new perspective. And so if I ask someone like, oh, how would you improve Uber? And I'm thinking about all these things around predicting when you need a car, or having no driver in the car, or, converting your car into the Uber, donating it to the Uber fleet or leasing it. Like, those are some ideas. But then if the interviewee says something about the actual riding experience and talks about, oh, I'm very passionate about long distance travel. And maybe there should be, like, Uber long hauls, or I'm very passionate about, multi-day kind of road trips. Or I'm very passionate about, having as productive experience working while you're commuting. And so it's all about, like, that interior experience. And that's great, because my kind of ideas were all around outside the Uber and the business model, maybe. And this person is talking about, like, interesting customer demands that maybe I hadn't thought about. And so, the great product sense interviews that I've done of people are usually ones where at the end of that interview, I'm like, that's a really cool product. Those are really cool product ideas. Like, actually, if we were in that business, I would actually be excited about investing in that area. Whereas the good, maybe the leaning higher answers are like, well, a person was very structured and they talked about the customer problems, and then they, had a bunch of ideas. They categorized them. They prioritized them by effort and impact. They came up with good numbers. But there was nothing that really wowed me in the answer. That's a leaning higher answer. Whereas a higher is one where it's like, oh yeah, they made me think about whatever, Uber insurance, or Uber communications, or Uber, overlanding, whatever. It's like stuff that I thought was really interesting, plausible, that I hadn't thought of before. So when you have these breakthrough ideas that connect the market needs with customer behaviors and ideally like some new technology in a novel way, like that's a great product sense interview in my opinion. Okay, here's another thing that you're going to want to look for when you're interviewing people, is you want to give them some real-time feedback. So if someone's nervous, maybe this is their dream company, and they're kind of going on for a long answer, you could let them just babble on and take all the time, but you might be missing out on a potentially incredible talent. And they just needed a little bit of course correction. Like, who hasn't needed some course correction at times, especially in these situations? So, if they're giving a long answer, you can say, hey, James, this is really helpful. I just want to make sure we are able to get through all of the questions I have for this interview. Would you mind trying to give me shorter answers? And I can always ask you for more details if I need it. Or if someone is overly conversational and you're like, okay, these are great ideas, Sarah, can you help me think through how you might structure your thought process and how you're unpacking this problem step by step? And sometimes they're too structured and you're like, oh my God, this is like a paint by numbers answer. And you could just say like, hey, Sarah, I'm not looking for the canonical answer to this question. I'm really treating this more like a informal jam session. Just feel free to throw out some ideas and we can kind of workshop them together. Sometimes they might misinterpret your question because maybe you didn't word it that clearly up front, and then they're kind of answering a different question than you thought you asked. Let them know, or give them another shot. And all of this is to say, part of your objective in an interview is if you have real talent that could be a game changer for your team, do you want to make it entirely conditional on how well they've mastered this weird scenario, which is the one-on-one job interview, which is different than most meetings that they're going to have at your company? So I've seen the opposite happen, where there are people who are so great at interviewing, and then they join and you're like, oh my God, this person is not able to do the job. The opposite is also true. There are people who are incredible product management leaders who are just okay at interviewing. And then if you add maybe you catch them on a bad day, maybe they're nervous, whatever. Maybe you're not on your game and you're kind of like not creating the environment for them. Try and give them many chances. And similarly, the opposite is true. And then maybe this is where it relates to the point about going deeper. There are also times where you as the interviewer, you feel like you really like this candidate. Maybe you like their resume before the interview even started, or that started and you're doing the kind of like warm up, small talk, and you just really jive with this person. Maybe you went to the same school, or you worked at the same companies, or you live in the same neighborhood, whatever it is. That is the opposite problem, where now you have to kind of confirm and check these biases, positive or negative. Okay. I think this might be the last one. Hold on. Yes. So the last one is, let's make believe that you have done a really good job seeing the best version of this candidate, and you have a clear signal on whether you should advance this person in the interviewing process or not. Here's the rub is that while you have all the power right up until the point that you want this candidate, the moment you want this candidate, you don't have all the power anymore. Now they're kind of shoes on the other foot, and they're now going to decide if they want to work for you. And typically, if you really like them, they either already have other offers, or they could just stay in their current situation, or they're far along in other processes where they don't have to take your offer. And so thinking about how was this candidate experience, how did you kind of handle yourself? Are they excited about every meeting with you? Do they feel like, oh yeah, I could work with this person? How do the other team members talk about the team or the company or you as a leader? These are incredibly important things. And I think in this job market, it is possible for some hiring managers to kind of forget that, yes, there are hundreds of candidates per role these days. And sometimes you post a job and you might get hundreds of applications like in 12 hours. I had that experience myself last year when I was hiring for an intern. And I was blown away by how much supply of candidates there were. But at the same time, like when you get down to who you're going to extend an offer to, if they feel like, this isn't the team they want to work on, or they just got rubbed the wrong way, like you're not necessarily going to be able to convert them. So think about that too. So here's the takeaways. If you are better at evaluating talent, you're going to be able to attract more candidates for future roles. You're also going to be able to build a stronger team. I cannot tell you how many companies I've worked with recently who are like, hey, we have this PM team. It's good, but it's not really, firing on all cylinders. And I'll meet with the company and kind of talk to the team, and I'm like, okay, these are all great people, but they're not really all right for this team or this company or this role. And I wonder, like, well, how did they end up here? And it's usually because of the interview process. In some ways, because there are so many applicants, what happens is the company will focus on dividing up the process into cohorts. And so the first round of applicants that come through, they get slotted for, the screening process and so on. And then the rest get kind of held back. And then if there's good enough candidates in that first batch, they'll make the offers and the process will be over. Well, part of the problem is how accurately you are assessing candidates even at the resume level, which today is very hard because everybody's resume has been tuned by ChatGPT or Claude to, match that job description perfectly. The better you can do a job at assessing candidates, the stronger your team's going to be. Giving you an example, you want to think about every time you make that PM hire, and if it's a director hire, if it's a PM leader hire, that's kind of a close to a bet the company move you're making there, and you make the right call, it's going to be amazing. You make an almost right call, it'll be fine, but you'll pay an opportunity cost. And you make a so-so half right, half wrong call, it's the worst because that person will be around for a while. You're gonna struggle. It's not gonna be obvious. You'll try and coach them up. They're gonna try hard to make it right, and then it's not gonna work out. And then of course there's what some people think is a bad scenario, which is certainly, it's not a great one, but it's actually much better than the last one I talked about, which is like they're a terrible fit. Because in those situations, you'll figure it out pretty quickly, and hopefully you'll be able to make a change pretty quickly. if you're better at assessing, you're going to get a stronger team. That's also going to increase your acceptance rate and your yield for future roles. And ultimately the company is going to be better off. Okay, I think that's the last slide. Oh, maybe not. So here are the takeaways. If you are a CPO, VP of product, looking for a director or GPM, number one is you focus on that candidate. Your job in this interview is to see the best version of this candidate possible. Give them the environment, give them as much latitude to kind of bring out their best. This is not a, let's arm wrestle kind of approach. You could try that, but I would argue like you're going to end up with a kind of a more noisy signal. The second one is the deeper you can dig into a question and really get into the nitty gritty, the more you can protect yourself from the sort of veneer of interview preparation and kind of mastery of the common frameworks and common questions. Third is find candidates that really wow you with breakthrough insights and thinking. It's hard to teach that. And in today's world where software engineering is kind of getting commoditized, it's more about, well, how do we use all these capabilities to create new experiences than how do we write this code to make this happen? And that's where great, creative, kind of bold thinking PMs that are grounded in data and customer insights and strategy, but also have a little bit of kind of, out of the box thinking, like those PMs are worth their weight in gold. Guide and clarify. So if a PM is kind of in the interview, if they're running off the rails, help them back on. Because what you don't know is, well, were they an amazing candidate who just happened to have a bad interview and I could have given them another chance to kind of reset? And if you're wondering, like, well, why should I do that? Let me ask you, like, as a senior company leader in your career, you've probably had interviews where you weren't 10 out of 10. And in some of those situations that the hiring company may have passed on you, even though you have all this amazing talent. Imagine if that interviewer had given you an opportunity to kind of reset. And then lastly, as much as this, is about finding those, real athletes or the kind of, early round combine picks, you are being interviewed too. And that doesn't mean you should be an easy interviewer. Actually, being a challenging interviewer, but done in a very warm, constructive, thoughtful, humble way is one of the best ways to convince someone to join your team. So you don't have to, be a pushover, but, if you come across in a way that's, not inviting and doesn't create psychological safety, a lot of people may not choose to come over and work for you, or they may have more demands on the offer than if they were really super stoked about the company, the team, you, the peers, etc. So hopefully this was helpful. Feel free to like and share if this was useful for you. And couple of side notes. If you're in this position where you're looking to hire senior talent, particularly for product management, and you're at a tech company and you need help, I can tell you right now, you're not going to need help getting more candidates. What you may need help with is probably figuring out the ones that are going to be the most impactful and high ROI and the best fit for you. I've helped a few companies do that lately. I've enjoyed it. I've probably made over 100 PM hires in my career. Certainly, probably interviewed easily thousands. And so I've got a pretty good eye for talent and a good eye for fit. So I'm happy to help your company out if that's something you're interested in. And the other thing is, if you're on the other side and you're a candidate and you do want some interview practice or interview coaching or advice on negotiations or evaluating different offers, I play on that side of the table as well. So reach out anytime I can be helpful. And if you're not seeing this on Substack, go look for me on Substack as Fireside PM, and you'll find other useful articles and videos like this. All right, let's get back to work.